Well, we have a full group here today, so thank you all for being timely and logging on time. My name is Julie Lanford. I am the cancer dietitian, and I author cancerdietitian.com. I have been writing the blog for, um, 9 years, actually. I think 2017 in November will be the 10-year anniversary of the website, which seems crazy because I just started writing it because of the patients that I was working with in a cancer treatment center. They had lots of questions, and I felt like they needed a place to go, and so I just started writing it my own time and on the side. And when I started working for Cancer Services, which is the nonprofit I have worked for, we have just rolled it into our educational programs, and so I'm really excited that you're all engaging with this. I see people from all over the country, but if you don't know, we are based in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and we are a local nonprofit here. We do a lot of different assistance, financial, physical, and so the nice thing is that I get to do programs, real-life programs, but I also very much enjoy doing these webinars, videos, and writing for the website. So I am happy you're all here, and I would encourage you to ask me questions either, as we go along, but also if you think of things throughout just your weeks and your journeys, to send them on, because they help me to know what people are interested in, what I should write on, or what other webinars I should be doing. So it has been a little while since I've done a webinar, but I actually did this, covered this topic and did this as a live seminar in one of the rural counties around us here in Winston-Salem, and the participants were like, "Hey, yeah, you should record this and do a webinar." And so I thought, well, I have all the stuff ready anyway, so sure, why not go ahead and make it available to all of my sort of readers everywhere. So here we are. Our topic today, why we eat, emotional eating and illness. And so I had a Facebook follower actually ask, is this specific for cancer survivors, or is this emotional eating in general? And so my answer was that it's general, emotional eating and health. But of course, I always come from a context of mainly working with cancer survivors. So we'll talk about that. And I know a lot of my audience are cancer survivors or people who are caregivers of somebody who's faced cancer, although almost all of us know somebody who faced a cancer diagnosis. So we will definitely do this. And at our office, we actually have a program once a year, an 8-week program called Mindful Eating, and I actually am not the expert on mindful eating. And so we get a local dietitian here who is an expert. And so some of the information that I'll share here today, I've gleaned off of her. And her name is Deborah Benfield. She has a great Facebook page as well. So it's called Body and Mind Nutrition and Yoga, actually. And so she might be somebody that you would want to follow on social media if you are particularly interested in it, in the emotional eating and sort of topic. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, if you do have questions as we go along, you can type those in your box. If you're on the phone, you won't have a way to ask your question because everybody's on mute, but you can always send me an email, especially if you send me that question before tomorrow when I post the recording. I can include some of that information in the blog post with the recording. All right, so if you're not familiar with me, I told you I've been writing the website for almost 9 years, but my training, my background, I am a dietitian, and I'm a board-certified specialist in oncology nutrition, which means that cancer is my specialty, both in terms of reducing risk and also in terms of treatment and survivorship. I say my passion is really helping cancer survivors to live as healthy as possible, to optimize their nutrition, and this is me quoting myself, but just because someone knows how to eat doesn't make them an expert in nutrition. And I find there's so much misinformation that goes around, especially on the internet and through social media, but also just word of mouth and some of those old wives' tales. It's hard to tell when something is true and when something is not true. And so that's just something that I would caution you is when you are sort of receiving this nutrition information, to always stop and ask where is this coming from, and does the person know what they're talking about? And so Dietitians are actually trained in nutrition. It means we have a 4-year degree from accredited universities. And so we actually have degrees in nutrition. A lot of people who give nutrition advice or call themselves nutritionists don't actually have degrees in nutrition. Or they might have a training program, but it's not an accredited university. We also pretty much almost all of us have master's degrees. So I have a master's in public health. And then I have to take an exam every 5 years to maintain my status as a board-certified specialist in oncology. So it's just important that you know who's giving you your information. A lot of well-intentioned people often spread misinformation that's used and sometimes more anxious about. Grace is pointing out Deborah Benfield, who's the dietitian that we use for our mindful eating, is DL Benfield RDN on Instagram. And Angela is commenting that my voice is going in and out, so I'm going to try to sit still, and hopefully that will help. All right, so our agenda for today is that first we'll define emotional eating. We'll talk about when does emotional eating become a problem. We will have 3 things to do about emotional eating, and then briefly touch on what is a nutritious diet. And of course, at the end, we'll have time for Q&A. Right, so our definition of emotional eating, because, it's used a lot, I think, sort of thrown around, but really emotional eating is the practice of consuming large amounts of food, usually what we call comfort food or junk foods, in response to feelings instead of hunger. And so that's really more if you are eating because of a certain feeling that you're having, and it has nothing to do with whether you're hungry or not. So there's lots of reasons why we eat. This is kind of one of my favorite lists here. It's like, why do we choose to eat when we eat? We might eat just because it's time to eat. We might eat because we're bored. We might eat because we're lonely. We might eat because we're at a party. You want to hang out with friends, and of course, what do? Go out to eat. If you're somewhere and someone just offers it to you, you're going to eat it. If there's something just sitting out on the counter, you walk by, you eat it. And then kind of the last reason that we might eat is because we're hungry, which is sort of the opposite of how we want to be in terms of listening to our body's needs and being more intuitive about our eating behaviors. So it's estimated that 75% of overeating is actually caused by emotions. And so the emotional eating piece is when you have a reason that you eat, and that reason is because of your feelings, not necessarily because you're hungry. We want to be very aware of that. Here's something that I love to do is to get your participation, especially on this topic. I think it's fun to hear. What are your comfort foods? So when you are sort of feeling bad or lonely, or you just need a little bit of comfort and you're choosing a meal, what are your go-to comfort foods? I did this in the live seminar. I got, of course, mac and cheese. We got fried chicken. We got, chocolate, ice cream. Look, somebody else said mac and cheese. Jane says bread. Is there any specific kind of bread? Like for me, it's sourdough. Pasta is on the list. Chips. Sure, if I have chips around, it's really hard to not eat the whole thing. Everything. Brownies. I don't discriminate against any foods, right, if it's there. Rice and yogurt. So are those together or separate? That's very interesting. Anything sweet? Jane, any kind of bread, all right. Salty snacks, yes. So for me, I was telling the other group that for whatever reason, it's like white rice and butter and salt and pepper were this comfort food. And I don't know, when I grew up, we ate rice as a side dish, and you put butter on it. Grilled cheese and tomato soup. Grilled cheese for sure is on my list too. But my rice and butter, I don't know what it was. It was just, that's what to me felt like comfort food. So if I had a really stressful day at work and I would come home, I didn't know what I was going to eat, and I just wanted to eat something that just really kind of made me feel good. I would eat rice and butter and salt and pepper. And so I had to kind of figure out, okay, what do I do with this? So I'll kind of tell you the end of that story later. But okay, so rice and yogurt together, which is probably not too far away from my rice and butter, but might be a better combo for me. Um, so Angela's saying I never made a connection with the type of comfort foods I go to, but I notice that when I'm feeling a certain way, I will eat in general. So yes, that is also, there might not be any certain food. It's just we're often, as children, or food is love. That's how we love people. So for people facing cancer, a lot of times, when you're sick, what do people want to bring you? What do they want to do? They want to bring you food, because feeding people is closely tied to caring for them. So it's not a surprise we associate food with comfort and love. And as a child, it's sort of built in, right? Our parents or our caregivers care for us and they feed us. And so we connect that with love. And sometimes even now in classrooms, if you do a good job, we give you candy. And so you start making this association of, oh, when I feel good and someone, gives me food. And that can be normal. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, when it crosses over from, oh, that's just normal emotional eating, to, oh, now it's become a problem. So what I want to get to first, though, is talking about hormones and appetite. So when we think about being hungry, in this slide here where we talk about all these other reasons why we eat, and then sometimes we eat because we're hungry, but there are things that actually make us feel hungry. And those are generally our hormones, and they affect our appetite. And it's a good system that we have in our bodies. We need our hormones to tell our brains that our stomach is empty, or that our muscles need more energy, or that our other cells need energy, and we get energy from food. And so really the hormones, it's how our body communicates with the brain. It's how our body is telling our brain we're full, or we're hungry, we need more food, we need less food. And so there are four kind of major hormones that we've looked at in regards to appetite. Leptin, which is what we call a satiety hormone. So satiety is that feeling of fullness. So it may tell your brain, oh, the stomach is full, so we can stop eating. Ghrelin, which is a hunger hormone. So that tells our body we're hungry. Dopamine is a reward hormone. So that's, it kind of makes you feel happy. And then insulin is the sugar hormone. And your sugar hormone really helps to make sure that sugar gets into your cells, or glucose gets into your cells. And that glucose is your energy source for all the cells of your body. And so you want your insulin to basically take the sugar out of your blood. The glucose that's in your blood that's, comes from breaking down of all different types of carbohydrates, not just from eating sugar to get blood glucose. We need that carbohydrate to give our bodies energy, and the way it goes is that it breaks down into glucose. Glucose goes into our blood, and then insulin helps get the glucose from the blood into our cells, where it's really going to do the good work. And so there's no one hormone. Sometimes I will read articles or see, this study or that study talking about one of the hormones and how they think, oh, this is going to be the answer to people's, problems with overeating or with weight gain. But what we're finding is that it's not that there's a problem with any one. All these hormones are working together. It's a very complex system in our body, and we can't just focus on one without seeing the whole picture. And so as much as we want to research one little thing, when it comes to the human body, they all work together. And so I have some, I think they're coming up next, but tips specifically on how to keep your hormones and your appetite pretty stable. And that's what we want, so that you're not going through periods of extreme hunger or extreme fullness. And especially when it comes to emotional eating, what we find is that people may overeat because of an emotion, but maybe they're emotional and hungry. And then you overeat because of your emotion, and then you're overfull. And that can be kind of an uncomfortable place. I don't know if this slide is really small for you guys, but when I created them, they were the full size of the screen. But I will send this out in handout form by email tomorrow. But these are just some simple tips to manage. You can't control your hormones, but your daily lifestyle behaviors will influence how full, how hungry, and how your hormones are able to function. And so you don't have complete control, but there are things you can do to help keep your hormones under control. First thing is to always eat on a schedule. So we want you to eat within an hour of waking up and every 4 hours during the day. If you go too long without eating, you get over hungry, and when you get over hungry, you tend to overeat. So we want you to really think about, okay, how can I make sure that I'm giving my body nutrition throughout the day on a regular basis, roughly around the same time each day, so my body knows it can count on it, and my hormones don't have to go, way crazy telling me, eat, eat, eat. For people who have completely erratic eating schedules, who skip meals, who maybe don't eat breakfast, they go long periods of time without eating, that can be hard on your body. And it can be hard, and then your hormones tend to be kind of up and you get hangry, right? When you're hungry and hungry at the same time. Eat a high protein breakfast. So after you've gone all night long without eating, you need to make sure that you're getting 20 to 30 grams of protein with your breakfast, which might seem high, and for a lot of Americans who have habits of consuming low protein breakfasts, this can be, a little bit of a change, but it has been shown to be helpful to manage your appetite and help nourish you and keep you full. And what I would point out is if you're somebody who eats things like cereal for breakfast, you need to make sure that you are getting a protein source, whether you're getting a high protein milk or even a normal protein milk. But the commercial almond milks, the cashew milk, the coconut milk have almost zero protein. So if you're eating like Cheerios with almond milk, that's almost no protein in itself. All right, so someone said they haven't made a connection with the type of comfort foods, but noticed that when they're she said, I'm used to the traditional 3 meals a day. Is that bad? It is not bad, which would count. A lot of people, they're going to eat their breakfast, their lunch, and their dinner. It won't be more than, 4 or 5 hours in between. I would tell you, if you feel like you're really hungry by the time it comes to lunch or dinner, and if you think you overeat those meals, it might be beneficial to you to eat a snack in between. You don't have to eat a snack in between if you feel like you get to lunch and you have a normal hunger level and you eat a normal amount of food and you feel satiated or full but not too full, then your schedule is working for you. But if you may have a day where you're going to eat a later lunch, definitely have a snack. And then the other thing is, if you have a day where you're more active, your body may tell you before it's time, if you've gone for a long walk, like right now in North Carolina, the weather is beautiful. It's like 70 degrees and sunny outside right now. So, I'm going to be more active on those days. When you're more active, your body is going to need more. So you just want to pay attention to that. Eat a variety at meals and snacks. So have at least 2 different food groups represented, or 3 if it's a meal time. So that you're not just eating one thing at snack time. You don't just eat crackers. You eat crackers with peanut butter or crackers with hummus or something that has 2 different food groups. Omega-3 fats can really help. Those are the healthy types of fats like you find in walnuts and flax seeds. Chia or any other kinds of seeds and nuts are generally good sources. Hormone-suppressing foods at each meal. So that's a little confusing because so there's what we call high protein or high quality protein and fiber will help to keep your stomach fuller for longer, and you'll be more satiated so that your hormones don't feel like your stomach's emptying really fast. So make sure that at each meal you have protein and you have fiber-rich foods. Fiber-rich foods are things like whole grains, fruits, and vegetables, and then your quality protein is going to be either from beans, nuts, seeds, or some kind of animal protein. And meals with low energy density. So that generally means that it can fill up your stomach, but it doesn't have a lot of calories. So you think of fruits. soups, because water can help fill up your stomach, but it doesn't have a lot of. Vegetables are great. We call them low energy density, but it's high nutrition density that you get in your vegetables and fruits. Whole grains are all good choices. So you'll see that those are low energy density, but they also are fiber rich, which helps with number 5. Find pleasure in other activities. So if you notice that you are reaching for food, even if it's, whatever kind of food is around, because of an emotion, say you're bored, you're lonely, you're depressed, you're whatever it is, you want to try to replace the eating behavior with something that's more positive. Whether that's listening to music, going for a walk, doing yoga, meditating, or prayer. Those are things that sometimes you have to sort of train your brain to go to something else instead of always turning to food. It's Girl Scout cookie season, right? So, I'm bored, or I'm doing all this work and I just want to procrastinate. I'm going to go find that box of cookies. We have to retrain our brains to do something different. Get adequate sleep. This is a big one. So aim for at least 7 hours of uninterrupted sleep, which can be difficult, but if you're having significant sleep issues that don't look like they're going to resolve anytime soon, you should probably have that conversation with your doctor, because sleep is really important for you. Commit to regular exercise. It really will help your appetite hormones if you are consistently having exercise. And I will tell you, it doesn't matter what type of exercise you do as long as you enjoy it, because we want you to stick with it for the rest of your life. Walking, dancing, I don't know, I like to play dodgeball, I like to do different I personally like team sports better because there's somebody else doing it with me. But I do have dogs, and so they're great walking companions. It helps burn energy, it helps build muscle, and boost your metabolism. Really, the only way you can boost your metabolism is by being physically active. There aren't foods that will boost your metabolism. As much as the internet wants to tell you that, celery and cabbage will boost your metabolism, it doesn't. But building muscle and being physically active will increase your metabolism. And then utilize your therapist, and we will talk about this a little bit later on. But using professional counselors to help with behavior change, if you try to start making these changes and you find it's really not happening for you, those counselors are experts in behavior change to coach you through that. When does emotional eating go from just being kind of, normal, we all do it, to becoming a problem? So I say it's normal when it only happens once in a while. Okay, so everybody wants definitions. What does that mean? So I define something as a habit if you do it 3 times a week or more. Let's say you have a big project at work coming up, or a family reunion that is, yes, fun, but also stressful, or a difficult conversation you're going to have. And so, once a month you tend to sort of turn to a bag of chips that you see in the store, where you went grocery shopping, you grabbed it, you brought it home, and now it's there. You get in this situation and you overeat the chips. Once a month, not really a habit, right? But if you do it 3 times a week or more, that's what I consider a habit. And if you start making it a habit, it will start to impact your health and risk for disease. Emotional eating usually involves food choices that are high in processed foods, high in sugar, less healthy fats, pro-inflammatory patterns of eating, which we'll talk about in a minute. So when emotions cause you to take in more nutrients than your body needs, and usually those nutrients are in kind of the junk food, processed food area, you just start to store those, and they're not giving you the nutrition that you actually need. This results in unhealthy weight gain and could cause your body to be more resistant to insulin, increase your risk for diabetes, increase risk for heart disease, increase cancer. And so it's not that it's normal to emotionally eat. Like, we all go to parties around holidays and birthdays, and of course we're eating cake because it's there or because we're celebrating someone's birthday. That is completely normal, and we want you to do that. But if you find, 3 or 4 times a week after dinner or after the kids go to bed, you're going to the freezer and you're filling your bowl full of ice cream to sort of feed this stress that you've had all day long and you could finally let go, that's not going to be a good habit. And so that can negatively impact your health. When we talk about foods, I mentioned, with emotional eating, a lot of times we're consuming or over consuming the foods that I call are immune busting. So they have a lot of added sugars like sweetened beverages or desserts. They're more refined starches. So if you think about my white rice and butter, it is white rice is a refined starch. It's not one of those complex carbohydrates that you are getting fiber and lots of nutrition from. It's higher in saturated fats. So when I put butter on my rice, it's higher in saturated fats. Trans fats, so processed foods like the little pizza box that's in this picture, is usually higher in trans fats and saturated fats that are not so heart healthy. And then I think the real key is that, when we emotionally eat, if we make it a habit of emotional eating, we are not eating that many fruits and vegetables because we're going for the other junk foods. And that's filling us up. And then we're missing out on all the great nutrition that you get in fruits and vegetables and whole grains and those healthy fats. So what are the immune boosting foods? Phytochemicals, which come only from plant foods that aren't too processed. So kind of the end of my story about the rice and butter is that I realized, okay, well, if rice and butter and salt and pepper are a comfort food for me, can I turn it into like a nutritious comfort food? So can I eat brown rice instead of white rice and still get the same sort of comfort from the food? Can I use canola oil or a healthier fat instead of butter to flavor my rice? Salt and pepper, that's fine. And actually, the idea of having rice with yogurt might be something that I'll try next time, because I like to buy plain Greek yogurt. It tastes like sour cream unless you add sugar to it. And I love sour cream. And to me, the thought of, sour cream on rice, I think I could do that. So if we can think about some of those comfort foods that maybe, if it's a habit, can we make a comfort food choice that is more nourishing? Still don't want to overeat more food than our body needs when it comes to nourishing foods, but if we can figure out how to make that a better choice, a more immune boosting choice, then it's not such a contributor to health problems. But phytochemicals come in plant foods. Omega-3 fats you can find in walnuts. We talked about flax seeds. Also, avocados are healthy fats. Minerals come in all these healthy foods. Antioxidants from an orange, better than having orange juice. Vitamins, pre and probiotics. So you talk about that yogurt. That yogurt is actually a probiotic. And those are all patterns of eating that we've noticed actually help to improve your immune system and therefore lower your risk of disease. And so, okay, how can I make sure that I have a habit of eating immune-boosting foods? Either when I'm doing emotional eating in my everyday life. And usually, when you start focusing on these positive foods that you need to have in your body, if you think about eating on a regular schedule and including 2 food groups in snacks or 3 food groups in a meal, making sure you have fiber and a good quality protein in your meals, all of a sudden you're filling up on all these really nutritious foods and you don't notice because your appetite is more regulated, your hormones are better regulated, you are not having as much of these sort of cravings, is what we call them, or the emotional overeating as you did before. But rather than telling yourself, I can't have these or I'm not allowed to do that, it's much more effective for you to focus on, okay, but what is it that my body actually needs? Can I proactively nourish my body so I don't get to the point where I'm over hungry and emotional at the same time? But, knowing versus doing is a big difference. I went to school for nutrition. I thought I was really going to, change people's lives when I just educated them on nutrition. And what I found is that people generally, they know what they should be eating, but it is difficult to make the best choice. So when it comes to a healthy lifestyle, it's not knowing that matters most. What matters is having the skills to make the best choice. And a lot of times that is not a nutrition issue. That is a sort of counseling, behavior change, and a therapy issue. So there have been multiple people that have come to me for help and advice, either for themselves or their children or their loved one, and I have to tell them this is not a nutrition issue. This is a therapy kind of issue. It's a behavior that needs to be changed, not that they don't know the difference. And I will say it's also not only overweight people who struggle with emotional eating. We all have emotional eating habits regardless of our weight status. And I'm somebody who doesn't even really look at weight that much. I want to know, what are your behaviors? Because you can be overweight but have lots of muscle mass and be very active and eat plenty of fruits and vegetables, and I would say that you are healthy, versus somebody who is maybe of a, quote, healthy weight, but you don't know what their body composition is. They could have very little muscle mass. They could eat a lot of junk food and not eat a lot of the healthy foods and never be physically active, and they are not healthy. So I really prefer to focus on your behaviors as opposed to any kind of. There are three things you can do. We have some tips on managing. When it comes to emotional eating, really the first thing to do, if you think that you have a habit, or it's happening, 3 times a week or more with your emotional eating, maybe it's every day and you notice it's always the same time of day, you need to have a journal. So you want to keep a journal so that you can recognize why you are eating. So when you go to eat anything, before you eat, while you're eating, or after you eat, you need to take some time to think about, why did I just go and choose that food? You're eating when you're not hungry. So the other sort of partner piece to paying attention to your feelings is to also pay attention to your hunger level. So if you had a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is absolutely starving, 10 is stuffed full to the gills, where would your hunger fall when you're eating? So let's take, for example, it's mid-afternoon, I'm going to go find the Girl Scout cookies. Why am I doing that? What am I feeling at that time? Am I kind of bored, looking for something to do? And then, am I actually hungry at all, or am I not hungry at all? So those are things you want to think about when you sit down to eat, because usually emotional eating is mindless. You're not even paying attention to it at all. And so by journaling or writing down these things, you start to bring awareness to what you're doing. Number 2, figure out why you're needing comfort at that time. So if you're choosing comfort foods, what is the reason for that? Especially if you're eating but you're not hungry. What are you feeling? Why are you looking for comfort? Are you missing somebody? Are you feeling alone? And then find out, well, what else could I do at this moment to address this emotion? Because the other piece about emotional eating is that it often, in the long run, it does not actually help you cope with that emotion. You have a habit of this particular emotion, but then eating doesn't make you feel better, because most of us then overeat, and then we just feel guilty about what we've just done. And that guilt does not help you appropriately cope with the emotion. And so that's where number 3 comes in, which is utilizing expert advice. If you find yourself eating for emotional reasons a significant amount of time, or you notice it's always the same emotion, it's always the same emotion that I'm going to food, and I don't know why I'm feeling this way, that's when you really need to work with a therapist or a licensed counselor to help you kind of dig through, where are these feelings coming from, and also how can I heal and move forward. Because for sure, those are habits that you'll want to break. Here's a couple of resources. Maybe you're not ready to kind of go the counseling route, but you think that you still have some bad habits. There's a couple of books. One of the books is called Intuitive Eating. And so a couple of people who are on our webinar today, probably they know this book and they've read the book and they hopefully refer back to it. But this is what we've now made required reading for our mindful eating program for cancer survivors. Charisse, there you are. Yes, I love that book. I think it's a really great resource for for anybody really, especially in an environment where we have food around us all the time. So intuitive eating, a revolutionary program that works. It was written by experts, so these are dietitians, and really can help you become more mindful in regards to why am I eating what I'm choosing, why am I eating, the amounts that I'm eating, and how can I become more aware and make some change. The other thing is friends. So finding support from a friend who has successfully worked through emotional eating and has changed their behavior. And I will caution you on this. You will need to be picky about which friends can appropriately provide you support. Because there are a lot of people who claim to, be really interested in nutrition and health, and I would caution you that a lot of people interested in nutrition and health are misguided and often have disordered eating habits. And so they might be really fit, they might eat really healthy, but they may not have a healthy relationship with food. So you want to find somebody who has a very positive self-image and body image, no matter what their size is. You want to find somebody who has a positive relationship with food, so there's no food rules in their life. They eat a wide variety of foods. They're not somebody who, I can't eat this and I can't eat that and I can only eat organic this and I can't have that. Because those are not normal, healthy relationships with food. So when you're looking for friends to be your support, you want to find people who have a very positive body self-image, who are enjoying exercise, who enjoy cooking, or who have found recipes that they really like, and that they're joyful in their nutrition approach, and they're not following a lot of strict rules. I hope that made sense. Great. The last piece today, before we get to our Q&A section, is really just focusing on what is a nutritious diet. So we talked a little bit about, what kinds of eating patterns help with managing appetite hormones? What kinds of eating patterns help to promote your immune system and reduce your risk for illness? And they generally, if you're following an eating pattern, it should fit kind of these guidelines. So these are the ones that I've sort of put together after my years of doing workshops and reviewing different sort of diets that people always like eating, they like checklists. So this is, I guess, what I call my plant food daily goals checklist. There's no rules about you have to get these. It's just a loose guideline, and we want you to, more often than not, get these in your day. So get plant proteins every day. Beans, nuts, seeds, as a protein source, at least one meal a day. It does not mean that you can't ever have meat. You can have meat on a plant-based diet, but you should still have plant-based proteins on your meat eater diet. So beans, nuts, and seeds are great sources of protein, so get those at least once a day. If you eat meat, a small portion is really adequate. In the U.S., we have really overdone our meat portions, and while we want you to get plenty of protein, it needs to be spread throughout the day, so not a whole lot at once. So the size of a piece of meat that's about the same size as a deck of cards or a can of tuna, that's the right size meat, which is, small if you're defining it by a flavor foods with plant-based herbs and spices instead of salt-based flavoring. So whenever possible, use parsley and oregano, and dried is just fine. Put, cinnamon in your, I just made granola today for a group. We put cinnamon in our granola. We put it in, oatmeal. Anytime you can use spices and herbs to add extra flavoring, you will get extra plant nutrients that are 4 to 5 cups of fruits and vegetables, that's combined every day. So my general guideline is that you would have a cup of fruit with breakfast. If you have vegetables with breakfast, you get bonus points. So at my group that I did some food demonstrations for just before this webinar, we actually made a green smoothie. So if people have spinach with their breakfast, I give them extra credit. 1 cup of vegetables with lunch, so that's generally about half of your plate should have vegetables at lunchtime and at dinner time. And then a lot of times at lunch you'll also have a piece of fruit, or at snack time you'll have a piece of fruit or a vegetable with your snack. And when you do that, when you have that habit of fruits and vegetables at every meal and snack, it adds up quickly. However, if you're somebody who doesn't have any fruit at breakfast and barely has vegetables at lunch, it's really difficult to get your total in just at dinner. And the other piece of a nutritious diet is minimizing processed plants. It doesn't mean that you have to avoid them. And so when I was talking about maybe friends or family members who have they claim to eat really healthy, but they have maybe not the healthiest relationship with food, they usually have very strict rules about this. And they say, you should not have any added sugars at all, or I eat clean, whatever that is. Only eat organic. I can't eat this. I can't eat that. Not necessary. When we say minimize processed plants, it means as much as possible you want to choose 100% whole grain instead of enriched white grains. Does that mean you never have white rice? Sometimes if I go to the bakery, I'm going to get a loaf of bread, and it's probably not 100% whole grain, but that's okay because we're going to enjoy it. Choose plain versions of foods and flavor them yourself at home. So the yogurt, I always buy plain yogurt. If I want to add sweeten to it, I might use sugar at home, but the amount of sugar I use will not be the same amount as if what's added to my yogurt container before I buy it. And the same thing with oatmeal. I don't buy oatmeal packets. I buy oats, and we make oatmeal in a pot, and then we flavor it ourselves. It might be brown sugar, it might be honey, it might be just using fruit. But we flavor it ourselves because then we know, I'm using just as much sugar as I need to make it taste good without having too much. Drink water and unsweet tea or coffee instead of sugar-sweetened beverages. It doesn't mean you never get to have sweet tea or you never have a soda, but it might be once a week instead of every day. And so you want to find that right balance. Your body prefers nutrients in food, not pills. So there's nothing that you can take in pill form that is going to make your cravings go away. It's not likely that you have nutrient deficiencies that are causing you to crave things, although if you think that there is, you should have your nutrient levels checked, which is pretty simple. If you go to an annual with your doctor and you just get a regular blood check, they should tell you. If you're a cancer survivor, they're checking your blood all the time. If you have a deficiency, it will show up. If you don't have a deficiency, then that's not the issue. I want you to get your nutrients in food form. Unless you're deficient, you don't. And every time you eat, you see it as an opportunity to promote your health. So keeping, in mind, if you're keeping records of your emotions and your hunger levels, if you're not hungry, we want to choose a different activity. If you are hungry and you do need to eat, you want to think about, in all of my daily goals, is there something I can eat that will fill a gap that I haven't had? Let's say, you're kind of emotional, then you realize, I'm emotional, but I'm also hungry, so I need to eat something. And you got bread, and you're thinking, I'm going to have some bread. Is there a way to make your bread more nutritious? Doesn't mean you don't get to have bread, but maybe what you put on that bread can help to make your nourishment that day extra healthy. So maybe you put peanut butter on the bread. If it were me and I was going for comfort food, I'm going to toast that piece of bread, I'm going to put butter and jelly on it, and then I'll probably eat 5 or 6 pieces, which is not, right? That's not the good habit, and then I'll be over full. And so really thinking through, okay, how hungry am I? Maybe 2 pieces of bread, put peanut butter, make a peanut butter and banana sandwich, I don't know. But finding ways that you are including healthy nutrients in with your comfort foods as you slowly start to change your habits will be more effective than trying to, brute force your way. Oh, I can never have bread. Bread is bad for me. I can't have it. Because those types of patterns of eating do not often result in success. The other thing to think about is this balance. So when we look at these recommendations, which I often talk about, I'm not saying that you have to be, quote, perfect. You do not have to check these off the list every single day of the week. But we want it to be more often than not, right? So I use the 80-20 rule. 80% of the time, you're eating kind of that nourishing, plenty of fruits and vegetables, getting regular meals, making good choices. So that's roughly 5 or 6 days a week. And then 20% of the time, which is maybe 1 or 2 days a week, okay, I went out to eat today. That wasn't the most nourishing meal, but it was fun. I went with my coworkers, or I went out with my spouse, or I had a good meal with my kids, or whatever. Your body can manage that. We're meant to enjoy food. We're meant to have these sort of special foods. Maybe not the most nourishing, but they're definitely nourishing our souls. However, if you find that your ratio is switched so that 80% of the time you're kind of eating generally based on your emotions, and 20% of the time you're eating based on, choosing nourishing foods, that's out of balance, and we want to figure out how to get back to balance. So you don't have to be 100%. Really, when it comes down to it, I always say this at the end of all my presentations, is we want you to keep calm, eat your vegetables, really find ways that you enjoy life. And when things get out of balance, we got to get them back into balance. But there's no reason why you should feel like you have to follow strict rules or that you're not allowed to do any. So that's the end of sort of my organized content. And what I would do now is really open it up for any particular questions that you all have. So if you're on the computer, you can type those in the chat screen. And I will send out some of the resources that I mentioned today in the webinar. I will send out after it's recorded, and I'll put it all together and send those to you by email. And also, someone asked, what causes people to get sleepy after lunch? So that's a couple of things. Part of it might be, in some cultures they actually take naps after lunch, and that's probably because our bodies might need a little bit of rest. So I would tell you, if you get sleepy after lunch and you have the flexibility in your schedule to take like a 30-minute nap, I'd tell you to do it. Now, for a lot of us in the U.S., our schedules aren't really built that way. And so sometimes you can get overtired if you eat a whole lot at a time, because your body is then focused on digesting, and there's so much for it to digest that a lot of energy goes to the digestion process. Your brain gets kind of tired, and so you get sleepy. So it sort of depends. If you find you're sleepy after lunch a lot, I would pay attention to the timing of your meals to see, are you eating a pretty good breakfast with 20 to 30 grams of protein? Is your lunch, within 4 hours after that? If it seems like you're getting to lunchtime and you're really hungry, like stomach is growling, I say, my stomach. And you're sort of logging that in your hunger journal, and you notice that happens regularly, I would encourage you to add a mid-morning snack so that by the time you get to lunchtime, you're not so hungry that you eat so much that you then are overtired. Does eating sugar and refined carbs cause you to crave more of those things? So I know there's a lot of talk about sugar right now. I've listened to some of the interviews with these, authors that write about the research on sugar and all these kinds of things. And I don't know that, so as dietitians, we really look at research from a big picture standpoint. And we want to see multiple studies. We want to see how it affects your day-to-day behavior. I don't think have great evidence right now showing that it causes you to crave more of them. However, what we do know is that when you eat refined carbohydrates or you eat simple sugars and it's not in the context of like a meal, so let's say that you have a soda or you have like in the morning you have a donut and orange juice, which are both kind of refined carbohydrates. They're both simple sugars, right? There's very little fiber. There's very little protein. And there's very little, well, there's fat in the donut. So your body is going to digest those carbohydrates pretty quickly because there's not a lot else for it to have to work on digesting. So you digest it, it goes into your blood sugars spike pretty fast, your insulin comes in, and all of a sudden your blood sugars drop really fast. And that can leave you feeling hungry again sooner rather than later. And so that can kind of set you up for eating more of it. And that's why we want you to have kind of a balanced meal. So even if you have a donut, rather than having orange juice, can you eat an orange? And can you have an egg with that? Hard-boiled egg or something that gives you a wide variety of nutrients and therefore you digest it slower. And when you digest it slower, your blood sugars don't rise as fast, they don't drop as fast, and you don't get that same kind of response, which also ties back into the getting sleepy. Is that drop in your blood sugars after your body is finally pulling in that sugar into your cells can oftentimes leave you sleepy. So someone asked, I speak to many elderly audiences. Any specific nutrition advice for the elderly? How they may metabolize nutrients differently? So I actually have done a talk for some nurses on elderly nutrition. And I think the biggest key for the elderly is that their bodies they have lower metabolism usually because they're less active and they have less muscle mass. Their calorie needs are a little bit less. However, their digestive processes aren't quite as efficient. And so it's even more important that they have a good quality diet. And then on top of that, as they age, they might not feel like preparing foods, or it's just them in the house and they don't want to have to make food for just one or two people. And so they eat out a lot more, or they are provided food by the cafeteria or the dining hall where they live. And I find that not only is their metabolism and their muscle mass and their activity level going down, they're also consuming a less nutritious diet than they're used to. So whenever possible, for the elderly, I think their diet quality, having lots of nutrient-dense foods as opposed to energy-dense foods is really important, as long as it's important to the person, because I think that's the other piece is, we tried to push broccoli on my grandma. She hated it, and it wasn't a good relationship that we were having. And so really, what depends, what are the goals of the person? But generally, for the elderly, they need an even more nutrient-dense diet. Questions? So my mother's a breast cancer survivor, and after doing 6 months of chemo and a month of radiation, you feel like she has to eat differently, aggressively, natural, and healthy. We want breast cancer survivors and all cancer survivors to choose healthy foods. I don't think they need to be aggressive about their eating. Some people might call it, I call it being a food Nazi. That is not fun. Nobody wants to be a food Nazi or be around a food Nazi. However, there are great things that they can do to promote their health, and especially for breast cancer survivors during treatment, a lot of times their body composition changes. Sometimes they gain weight. Their metabolism slows down because they've lost muscle mass. And so all of those pieces are really important. But I don't think that she has to eat aggressively natural and healthy. I think she does need to focus on the same kind of, plant-based diet. I have another webinar on my website that's called Plant-Based Diets for Cancer Survivors, where I review maybe 5 or 6 different types of plant-based eating patterns that we think are good guides. So I would say yes. We want breast cancer survivors and all cancer survivors to consume plenty of plant foods. However, there's not good evidence showing that it needs to be organic. It doesn't matter to me if it's GMO or non-GMO. What matters to me is that they are eating fruits and vegetables on a regular basis, that they are getting plant-based proteins, that they are minimizing their intake of processed foods. She can still have her, brownies and ice cream occasionally. And then it's a tough balance when if her priorities are different from yours. So that's a whole other issue. What about the talk these days about eating more fat to feel full, especially coconut oil and full fat dairy? Yeah, I think people are kind of swinging a little far back on the pendulum for fats, which I have an article on my website about coconut oil, so you can read more about that. And I also have an article specifically on the fat sort of phase. I think it's called The Truth About Fats. Have the experts been lying? Because I came across this article where someone claimed all of the, heart disease experts had been lying about the fat intake. The truth is, fat does help you feel full, which is why most of us dietitians, we're not fans of the low-fat eating pattern. A lot of vegans will be low-fat just because meat is usually the source of more fat for people. But we want you to consume fats, healthy fats. Now, coconut oil is no magic food. It is not a miracle food. I don't think that people should be putting coconut oil in everything. And I also tell people, if you use coconut oil for your skin, because it is good for your skin, please don't use the same jar that you're using to cook in. Okay? So this should be different jars. But with the coconut oil, it is a saturated fat. It's more saturated than butter. Granted, some people will say, well, the type of saturated fat is different. Honestly, I don't think people need to worry about all those specifics. Let the nutritionists worry about that. For you, though, when it comes to saturated fat, we don't want you to have too much. Yes, you can have some, but don't be using coconut oil in place of your olive oil, because olive oil is those healthy omega-3 fats. And so sometimes what I see is oh, well, olive oil was a fad. Then people got out of that fad. Now they're using coconut oil in everything, which is not a good idea. So I keep coconut oil at home. I keep butter at home. I keep canola oil. I have olive oil. I have peanut oil. And if I'm going to use a coconut oil, it's going to be in place of butter. It's not going to be like baking. Or if I'm frying an egg, instead of frying it in butter, I fry it in coconut oil. But I don't want to replace, I'm not going to, use coconut oil in place of olive oil. That to me is not a good substitute. What suggestions for people with thyroid issues such as hypothyroidism? So generally, you'll want to make sure that, you're taking your medication so that your thyroid levels are where they should be. Now, I have heard some patients whose doctors are pretty good about regulating their medication based on their symptoms and not just based on their blood levels, which I think is a good doctor. But then from a nutrition standpoint, generally I think that you are going to want to do the same. I'm going to kind of go way back, more towards the beginning where we talked about these tips to manage appetite hormones, because what we see with thyroid issues is that people are a lot of times also having issues with appetite hormones. And while you cannot control it, so like I mentioned before, you cannot control your hormones, but these behaviors will help to sort of put your hormones in balance. So in addition to doing the medical management with your thyroid issues, you will also want to make sure that your lifestyle is helping to complement that. As opposed to maybe people who, and even diabetics do this too, where they, they just think, well, I'll just take my diabetes medication and then I don't have to manage my life. If you have that kind of attitude, it is like you are fighting your medication. Your body does not win out. And so it's the same thing with the thyroid issues. You want to make sure that you are clinically managing them as best you can, and that you are also utilizing the best lifestyle so that it complements the clinical management. can you talk a little bit about stress and hormones on weight management and inflammation? So generally, your stress will play a role in your appetite hormones and in your other hormones in your body. So when it comes, and I didn't put this picture in this particular presentation, but I have a picture of what all the different components of wellness are. And when it comes to nutrition, we tend to kind of pick and choose aspects of wellness that we think are most important. So all of you on here are obviously interested in nutrition. I think nutrition is really important because it's my career and I chose to go into it. But we also need to recognize that it's not the sole influence on our body's health and wellness, and that it is a piece, and it has to partner with all the other pieces of our health and wellness, which includes stress. So if you are not managing stress, if you are not sleeping well, it is going to, influence your hormones in ways that are going to counteract your nutrition strategy. And so we want you to focus on all those things. And the same thing with inflammation. So stress can contribute to inflammation in the body, probably through similar, pathways, hormonal pathways, as influence on weight management, because it may influence your sleep habits. And if you are so stressed out you can't sleep, and then when you don't get enough sleep, it messes up your weight hormones, your regulatory hormones or your appetite hormones, then all of a sudden you're eating more, you're stressed out, and you're hungry, and we all know what happens then. So they're very interconnected. And it's important that you pay attention to all aspects, which is why being physically active, managing stress, finding activities that give you joy, focusing on your spiritual health, all these things are really important. It's not just nutrition that matters. What do you tell patients about sugar and feeding cancer? Well, I tell people they should stop saying that because I will honestly, there is like a page on my website that has, I don't know, it's probably the second highest hits of all, and maybe the most shared page on social media of every page on my website. And I've written on the sugar feed cancer probably 12 times. So if you go on cancerdietitian.com and under hot topics, there's a sugar. I might even say the sugar feed cancer. I don't know. But there's a tab, and my most recent one I wrote on was why we should stop saying sugar feeds cancer. And so the truth is, I'll try to remember to include that one too, about sugar and cancer and how sugar works in our bodies. And it's a gross oversimplification to say that when you eat sugar, somehow it causes a cancer to grow. Because our bodies don't pick and choose where the sugar goes inside the body. So essentially that's sort of a myth. I call it a myth. But certainly we don't want people to overconsume sugar, which I kind of talked a lot about today. So there is a good balance, but people do not have to completely avoid it. Someone said, thanks. There's so much these days about fake news. But you think the problem's far worse with fake nutrition information, which I'm with you. Because it's almost like there's more information out there regarding nutrition that's not actually true. And so I really do kind of function in this place of, if someone says something about nutrition, I'm sorry, I'm not going to believe it until you can show me the facts, the solid information behind it. Because a lot of times it's just, it's hearsay. But I did read today, I think. So naturalnews.com has been kind of all over Facebook, articles being shared, and they're a very awful source of information, lots of bad information. And I think I read that Google actually removed them from their search algorithm so that they won't pop up if somebody tries to search something about nutrition. So yeah, Pam in Texas, you hear all the time. I know. When I first started working in oncology, I was like, where are people getting this? This is just a fad. They're going to figure it out. And, it's been circling around. That myth has been circling around for years. It's never going to go away because there's constantly new people facing cancer who are being told that, who need to know. So I'm 10, 12 years later, I'm coming to this point where I'm like, okay, it's It's going to keep getting asked, and I need to have a good, quick answer. So I'll send that fact sheet out too. Oh, other than the website, what other sites online provide good nutrition information? Of course, you would ask me, and I did not. I have a good, like my favorite resources, slides. And let me see if I can pull up one of my other presentations. So I love the American Institute for Cancer Research, which is www.aicr.org. They are a great resource for nutrition, solid evidence-based nutrition and cancer information. Another favorite resource of mine is the Center for Science in the Public Interest. They have a print newsletter called Nutrition Action Health Letter that is worth all $24 a year. It is so practical. So I think it's great for, if you're a health educator or dietitian, but it is great for patients too. I mean, like, best Christmas present to ever give people, because they wade through the science and give good, solid recommendations. And then they also, every month, they give reviews of different products that you can find in the grocery store, which I love. So that's cspinet.org. And they have a guide to food additives. And so I think that's helpful, too, because we oftentimes don't know, like, what are these things that are added to our foods? And some additives are fine, and some additives are not okay, and I don't know how to tell the difference. So they have a website called chemicalcuisine.org where you can get their take on whether something is safe or not. I think WebMD does a pretty good job, so I think that's a good one. Today's Dietitian magazine, if you're either a dietitian or kind of just a consumer but you're sort of a nutrition nerd, Today's Dietitian has great articles. Environmental Nutrition is another one of my favorite resources. So that's just environmentalnutrition.com. And those are some, I think, reliable places to go for information. And then I try to share, whenever one of my favorite groups shares information on social media or something that I think that my followers will like, I try to put that on mine as well. So that's all these different social media pages. So yeah, thank you guys so much for joining me today. Look, people stayed on like the whole Q&A time too. It's a little bit past our hour, so I will go ahead and say that we will free ourselves up for the afternoon. If it's nice in your area and you have time, get outside and enjoy the weather. And I look forward to hearing from you. Send me questions by email. Let me know what other webinar topics you think would be interesting. And I really appreciate you joining me today. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you again soon.